The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. I love my little, we had a friend of the show who made this custom for us, so I love that. This is the home for Autism Live, but it's also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're thrilled to be here this Wednesday morning with you. You know I love Wednesday. On Wednesday, often we have Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh with us to answer questions, and when we aren't able to have her, this is one of those mornings, we are sometimes fortunate enough, like this morning, to have Evelyn. I like stumbled over it. I have a friend who's Evelyn and a friend who's Evelyn, and it's always hard. When I'm with each one of you, I say the other name.
I'll answer either one.
Well, there we go. But Evelyn Kung is here with us, and I always have her explain to you guys what her title is. So explain that.
So I'm the clinical director at CARD, and I've been here more than 25, 26, 27 years, something like that.
But that doesn't even scratch the surface of what she does. And I'm already jumping the gun all over the place introducing her, but she's going to be answering your questions in just a second. Before we do that, we have to do a little housekeeping, right? We have to remind you that the show is meant to be interactive, and there are lots of ways for you to connect with us. And so our fabulous Traven is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect. One of the ways, of course, is through our website, which is autism-live.com. And when you go there, a lot of things to do on that website. You can be watching yesterday's show. You can watch the live show. You can watch shows from 3 years ago. You can search topics. You can search by category. You can search by guest. If you only want to watch our Temple Grandin videos, which are fabulous and lovely, there is a playlist that's just for those. If you only want to watch when we have Ask Dr. Doreen, you can search, and we have those searchable by text so that you can just search all of the questions that have been answered about a specific topic and see what the questions were and go right to them with just the click of a finger, which is wonderful. You can also write into us directly on our chat that's at the bottom of the page on autism-live.com. You will notice that when you start watching on our website, there will, about 6 or 7 seconds after you're on the website, a pop-up will show up that will ask you, do you want to subscribe? It's a free subscription, and I want to be clear with you that what you get is a weekly viewer guide. If you sign up there, and all you have to do is fill out your information, we will send you out a weekly viewer guide, and every once in a while we'll send you something extra. But it's so few and far between because I hate to get spam. So I hate to send things to people in fear that they will think that it's spam. But we have a survey that's going to be going out within a week that's about toys, because we want to know which toys you particularly love this year, because we're getting ready to do our toy guide where we give awards to toys. So we're wanting to hear from you guys in lots of different categories. And so that will be going out to people who subscribe. So please subscribe if you would like to. That will make the pop-up go away on that computer. But otherwise, if you don't want to subscribe, just click the little X and it goes away for the rest of the time that you're logged in on that computer. To the website. So having said all of that, I mentioned that we have Evelyn Kung here and she's going to be answering your questions. We do like to give you the disclaimer at the start, though, that there is no expert in any field that could give individually specific advice in this particular format, because they wouldn't have access to the individual, they wouldn't have eyes on the issue. It would be disrespect to think that they could give individual specific advice. So please send in as much information as you can. And then Evelyn will give you information from her expertise, which is vast. And that will hopefully lead you to be able to go back to the experts that you have locally and be more efficient, to know what you might ask.
Definitely.
To have an idea of where to go from there. It will save you time and money and energy, which we really particularly love. And it opens, sometimes what I love is when people write in and say, somebody asked a question and I didn't even know about that question. I didn't even know that was a thing until somebody else asked the question, and then I heard the answer and went, oh my gosh, I think that has to do with me.
Yeah.
And it's a way that we all help each other by asking good questions. So we're going to start with a question that came in last week on our live feature. They said, I've watched your show via YouTube and have heard you say questions can be asked anonymously, and that's absolutely true. This is a foolish question considering both what is at stake for my ASD grandson who recently turned 3 and the fact that he is making fantastic gains in speech, sounding out words, and imitation. But here is my question. I am the grandmother of 2 teenagers who have gone through the normal stages of development. My 3-year-old grandson, of course, doesn't relate to me the same way. He doesn't dislike me, and when his ABA is done, I can fully enjoy his cuteness, often by imitating him, which he enjoys. I think I'm grieving the close relationship that seemed to exist so easily with my other grandchildren. Any thoughts? And, you know, I love this question, and I love that you asked it anonymously, and I think that's part of the reason why we have a feature so that you can, because you guys can write in your questions on Facebook and YouTube, but then people see who you are. But if you want to write in anonymously, you can do it on our website, or you can email me, and if it's longer, my email is s.penrod@autism-live.com. And I know Traven, he'll put that up there eventually. But I love this because this is the truth.
This is real life.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is what happens a lot of times in families, and nobody talks about it, is that, you know, the way in which other people will now relate to your children is going to be different, and there is a grieving process around that. And, you know, it took my mother years. I got so mad one night, and I said, I was furious. We were visiting, and there were other kids there, and everybody was playing with the other kids, and I said, why aren't certain people in my family talking to my child? Why are they not interacting with my child? And my mother said to me, well, it's hard.
Yeah, it's really is hard.
It's hard to talk to him, and sometimes we don't know what to do. And then I immediately, you know, the hurt and the pain from that, I was like, oh, I haven't addressed this for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that this grandma is being truthful and saying this feels hard, and I don't really know what to do, but I know there's a whole lot of hope.
Yeah, and I have to say, like 20 years ago, when I used to travel to these little towns and meet these families, and a lot of times the grandparents were there because, you know, they were really concerned about their grandchild. And I think there's just a whole host of emotions as a grandparent.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a grandparent, but just the experience I had with the grandparents, you know, and they would come to me and say, okay, I'll do anything to help this child. But sometimes, I mean, it's just really mixed because there's a lot of scary feelings, fear, a lot of just like they want to hope, but they're too afraid to hope.
Yeah.
You know, and there's just so many emotions in meeting grandparents. Because actually, one of my favorite things to do is to do grandparents training. I love doing grandparent training because you want a relationship with your child and you want to interact with them, and it doesn't come easy.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It really doesn't. And you can try, and I love that you've already figured out a way that imitating him and that you can enjoy his cuteness. But a lot of this is, I say, hey, what are the things that you did with your typical grandchildren, and what do you want to do with him? And it becomes a list for you to make and look at and figure out, like, what really matters to me? What type of interaction do I want? Do I want to take a trip with him?
Yeah.
You know, do I want just the afternoon? How do I hang out with my grandchild? You know, there's a lot of these questions, and just trying to figure out for yourself, like, what really matters to you.
Yeah.
And then from there, taking it to your ABA provider,
Yes.
your BCBA, and saying, hey, here are some things that I want to do with my kid or my grandkid, and can you help me figure out how I can do this?
Yes.
and figuring out and looking at it and seeing what really matters to you, and then having the BCBA sit down and say, hey, look, I can work if you what are some toys, things that you enjoy, and we can put some of these toys or games into his learning so that you're a person that he does this with along with everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, or if it's talking takes time. You know, he's making gains, which is great.
Yeah.
But having those deep conversations, that is something that hopefully will come later.
Yeah.
You can't do it, you know, right away. And, you know, enjoying play or enjoying just being with you could be a hard thing. But the thing is, we can teach the kids how to do this. And so if you work with your ABA provider and say, hey, this is something that I really want, and especially if you're seeing him regularly after his ABA, maybe as a caretaker or some other way, it's important that you choose some skills that you want to do with him and that they put it into the program and that he can use with you and siblings or cousins or relatives anywhere out.
I love this advice because, first of all, you identifying what interaction you want and then saying it to the ABA provider, powerful, powerful thing. And this is for grandparents, this is for parents, this is for teachers, this is for anybody. You know, if you can identify this and talk with the team and say, how can we facilitate this? But I also, you know, love this idea of everybody is different, right? Even your other two neurotypical grandchildren were different, and you connect with them in a different way. And it's a thing of, I love this grandma because she's not giving up.
Yeah,
and a lot of people do. A lot of people shut down and go, well, I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to. And that's when it all hits the skids, right? But, you know, even now for me, of course, I'm not a grandparent yet. Thank you. I look forward to being a grandparent, but not anytime soon. But as I meet people on the spectrum of all different abilities, I was always the aunt who could make any kid laugh. We have this thing that usually when we're in grocery stores and I'm there with my husband and my son, I will see a baby and it's like my mission that I have to connect with the baby and get them to laugh. And I'll be playing peekaboo and I do fish lips and I have a whole routine to connect with a baby. But you know, it doesn't work with all of them.
Yep.
And it didn't work with my baby. It did not work with my baby. And so over the years, every time I meet somebody who's on the spectrum, it's a thing of, okay, so what will work with this individual? And it's not, I always like to say that ABA and thinking of this kind of thing, it's not, you know, if P then Q thing, it's a toolbox. And you go into your toolbox and you try different things to see what can I connect with. One of the things that expanded my mind so much when my son was diagnosed and then we were trying to become regional center clients and he had to be evaluated by another doctor. And if the diagnosis didn't match, it could put your whole program in jeopardy, right? So we go to this doctor and I'm very nervous and my child is not very interactive. And this guy made so little effort, but he had a drawer full of stuff and he pulled out, and so he pulled out a green balloon and he was just very casually turned away from my son and he blew up the balloon very calmly, and then he looked over and he let the balloon go and let it fly all over the room. And my son was like, what's happening, you know? And it was an entry point for this doctor to, you know, and anytime he wouldn't have my son's attention, he would just blow up the balloon and let it go. And I'm sure he had like 15 other things that he could do with kids because this guy has been doing this his whole life. But it taught me so much about how sometimes it's very tiny what we have to do to connect with kids. And already this grandma has found this imitation piece. So I hold out great hope for her and for this kid, and he's going to get better over time.
Yep.
And you're going to get better at what you're trying to do. But I think sometimes we think it's some grand gesture or something, but often that connection comes in very quiet little.
And I love hearing you talk about this toolbox because people always, BCBAs ask me, they're like, how do you walk into a room and actually know what to do with a kid? And I would say, you pay attention. Because you look at what that kid is holding on to, what's on that kid's shirt, what's like just around them. And it gives you a clue on what they like. And I always take advantage. If they're holding on to something, and even if they're not playing with it, I know that they like that, and that's a starting point.
Yeah.
So, like, as your grandson gets better, he'll be walking out of his therapy with something in his hand, or something like he's repeating something, and take those things as clues.
Yes.
Because chances are there's a reason he's held on to it, the words, or he's held on to that, object, and it is a clue that he likes it.
Yeah.
And I will take it, I'll say, you're holding on to something, and if I know anything about it, I'll say something about it. We had a 12-year-old, super aggressive, 2-to-1, which means there's 2 therapists for 1 child because his behaviors were so aggressive.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell me that he was 2-on-1,
nice.
Which is, not the best. And I walked in the room, and I walked straight up to him, and I saw the therapist looked at me like in fear.
Yeah.
But he was holding one of the little SpongeBob characters.
Yeah.
And so when I walked up to him, I was like, oh, you like SpongeBob? And he looked at me, and he came up to me, and he didn't talk a lot, but you could say, you're my people, like you knew SpongeBob. And just because he was holding Patrick in his hand.
There you go.
And it was just like, you like SpongeBob. And even though he couldn't talk, he was just like, he came up to me and gave me a big hug.
Yeah.
And
he was one of his people.
Yeah, I was one of his people now.
Yeah.
And it was just as simple as that. And I always tell parents and our therapists, look, when you walk in, whatever the kid has near him or with him or is saying, it gives you an idea of where that child is at that moment and what he likes.
And sometimes, I have one friend whose son is pretty heavily impacted, right? And it's like my mission. I want to have a connection with this young man. And, I'm talking like 2 years he didn't want to have anything to do with me. I'm not around him that often. But recently I was someplace where his dad was someplace, and he said, would you just mind waiting in the car with him for a minute while I go do this? And I said, no problem. And so we were sitting there, and, and this is a person who is nonverbal, and I don't know ever how much receptive he's getting. But so I started to sing, right? Because,
people like singing.
What else? I'm nervous. What else? Because I'm like afraid I'm going to let him down, right? So as I'm nervous, so I started singing. And he and I have a bond now.
Aww.
Because, and then there's one story too that I tell every little kid that I'm ever around, that if I can get for 7 seconds, that I tell them. It's this Wally the Worm story that I've told from the time I was in high school, right? And it's a thing kids, are often, they're like, what? The first time, but then I make them retell it, right? And of course I couldn't get my child to do this, which was a big deal to me. But then I would tell it around him with other kids. And one day in the back seat, he just told the story all on his own. Aww. Like months after I had done this. So it reminded me that these kids are always listening, and we don't know how much they're receiving. We don't know. But so I told this story to this young man he's probably 13 now. So, and it's a little kid story, but I was like, well, this is my shtick. And I told him the story, and there's a whole thing in it where, because the worm gets longer and longer. And I was like, oh, I don't think he was listening. Okay, well, I told the story. But then the next time he saw me, he came up to me and he was like, and he wanted the story. So I just say to you, don't give up, because it's so worthwhile when you make the connection. And sometimes it's an investment in time, but keep investing. And you know what? Your son or daughter and their spouse will notice that you invested, and those are the people that we hold close and appreciate more than anybody else, because they don't give up.
Yeah, and if you have questions, ask your BCBA.
There you go.
Because they should be able to help you.
We're being told we have to go to break because we've gone on too long. We'll be back after these messages. Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself sometimes, why does my child have meltdowns? Well, the difference between tantrums and meltdowns, they're a part of typical development, but meltdowns are when things get a little bit more out of control, when even the child isn't sure what's entirely wrong. Generally with a meltdown, there's an environmental component. There's something else going on outside the child that's making the tantrum worse. It's really important that we start to be detectives and take notes and look around at the environment and start to figure out what are the things that happen every time your child has a meltdown. And lastly, it's important to get help. You really can't face these kinds of things effectively completely on your own. Tantrums, they're a part of typical development, but don't accept meltdowns as something that just happens. Make sure you get help and support. You might be asking yourself if your child has autism.
Hi, I'm Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to Talk of Facts. We hear questions all the time, and we want to give you the answers that help make your journey in autism easier and more navigatable. Less than a year ago, we interviewed the top 100 doctors in the United States working with children on the spectrum, and we asked them a question in the cloak of secrecy. What are the top 3 mistakes parents living with autism do? Number 1, and the one that makes me laugh the most, is when they use their physician as a marriage and family therapist. 1, the doctors told me it made them uncomfortable, and 2, they were highly unqualified to provide that type of advice. So the night before your physician appointment with your MAPS doctor, get together with your spouse, significant other, and write out the list of the targets and the agenda that you want to cover at the physician's appointment. Get in sync. Then you'll be definitely spending less time and not making that doctor so uncomfortable. Second thing that was the most common mistakes parents living with autism make is they want to go too fast. And really, you want to pace yourself in the autism journey. We all know that we want to get our kid to be the best they can be and hopefully recover from autism. And what a lot of the doctors have told me is that you want to really pace yourself. 1, to let the labs be your guide, and 2, work with your physician on the prioritization and the delivery of the different medical interventions. The third most common mistake they felt families made was giving up too soon. And what you need to know is they're invested, they're looking at wanting to get the best from your child. But I tell you that when I got that and consolidated the 100 interviews with these physicians, most of the doctors who brought that up had tears in their eyes. They want you to know that they're in the fight with you, and they want you to know that hope is really real. It may take hard work and it may take time, but to not give up and to stay in the game. So let Talka help you. We'll have some more Talk of Facts for you in the future, real questions and real answers for the autism journey.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I know many of you have been writing in about the Nemechek protocol. And I just want to say that we have a policy here on the show that if we don't know about something that we say to you, we don't know. I mean, I've heard of the Nemechek protocol, but I don't know enough about it, and I don't want to put one of our experts in a position to talk about something that they're not an expert in. So we're looking into it, and our hope is that very soon that we will do a segment on a show, maybe even have Dr. Nemechek on the show to talk about it, because many of you are writing and asking questions, and I just got to be honest with you, I don't know enough about it. So but we hear that that's what you want to hear about, and we will make sure that we bring you some information about that. So a little disappointing, but it's like put a post-it note there saying to be announced soon. Also, a couple of housekeeping things. Somebody has written in this morning and asked, "Hi, I love your program. Can you please restart the 14-day free trial subscription for Skills for Autism? I want to try it before becoming a full member." I don't think that that's been taken away. I think that when you go to sign up for Skills, it should give you a notification that you get the first 14 days and you'll be charged on the 15th day. If you find that that is not the case, please write to me and I will double check on that. But as far as I know, it is still very much there. But hey, here's this other thing. When it does come time for you to start your full prescription, or even if you go, here's the better choice. Go to skillsforautism.com, go to the website, there's a phone number, call them and say, I'd like the 14-day, I can't even talk today. The 14-day free trial, but then on the 15th day, I would like the Shannon Penrod Friends and Family discount. Tell them I watched on Autism Live. There is a discount for Autism Live viewers, and say, so I use the words, I would like the Shannon Penrod Friends and Family discount. That's what I've named it. That's not what Skills calls it. But in any case, so that if day 15 comes and you do, stay a subscriber, that you get it for a lower cost. I think it's, a pretty good discount. So anyway, then another person wrote an insight, said, hi Shannon, where can I find the A-word Jack Riley videos? They're no longer on YouTube, please help. So here's what I need you to know about that, is that we love the A-word. We absolutely love the A-word, and we love this particular family. And one of the things that I love about being here and doing the work that we do is that it's always about what's best for the individual, right? I think we can all agree that that should be our mission always, right? What's best for an individual. So Jack Riley's family donated their time and had us videotape, and they put their lives out there. And then about a year ago, they wrote to us and said, we would appreciate it if you would put all of those videos on hold, because we would like for him to decide how he feels about his life being out there. And so they are not available right now in support of this family and this one individual. And who knows, very soon, we might find that we're able to show them to you again. And we are hoping still, looking for another child to follow and do this, but we're hoping that it's an older child. That's what we've been looking for and trying to identify for a while. But that's, it comes with some challenges, and understandably there are families who will say, yes, we want to do this, and then when they think about the whole scope of it, go, oh, I don't know if I really want to put our lives out there. And there's this whole thing about at what point is it advisable for the individual. This is something I wrestle with a lot. I put my child out there when he was younger, because we as a family decided, and I asked him with as much as he could understand at that time, are you okay with this? Are you okay with people seeing you and talking about you? And he said yes, but how much ability did he have to see the future and know what his life would be like as a teenager? And you'll notice that there are things now that I ask him on a daily basis, can I talk about this? And there's things I don't talk about.
Yep.
Right? Because that's his life and his privacy. So we always have to be mindful of the individual. I love whenever people write in and ask us, well, if ABA is so great, then where are all the individuals who are doing so great in their lives, who had the ABA and who are leading these full and rich lives? And I'm like, they're out leading full and rich lives, and they don't necessarily, it's not that they're ashamed, not at all. There's nothing about them that is ashamed. They are living their full lives, but they see that when you and I, as parents, find out that they once had a diagnosis of autism, then we're like, tell me everything, right? And it stops being about them where they are now.
And for me, what I realize is, it was perfect. Last year I saw one of the kids, who I think he was 17, and when his mom started talking about something with autism, he did the perfect teenage eye rolling,
Yeah.
like, we're on this topic again.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to do something. Can we talk about something else?
Yeah.
Like, they're just so tired of it, so many of the kids. You
Yeah.
know, that they're just like, why are we doing this again? Because they're out living their lives, there's so many more interesting things to talk
Yeah.
about. And, and that's every teenager too.
Right. I mean, it's a very typical thing. And I mean, think about your life. And if somebody wanted to talk endlessly about when you were 10 or 8 or 4 or even 16, when at a certain point you'd be like, hey, I'm here now. Like, what, while I enjoy, the fact that when I was 16 I did so, but now I'm 27.
Yeah. And there's just so many other things to talk about,
Yeah.
more interesting to them. So.
Yeah. Okay, I want to address a little bit as we were talking about the Nemetschek thing. Somebody wrote in and said, my girl is 8 on the autism spectrum, just started organic food, and I want to know if there's a doctor to see to guide me through this process. And she's very clear, this mom, and she says, I want recovery. Whatever I can do to help my girl have less symptoms of stimming, to clear her from this fog. My child sees a pediatric doctor and an autism doctor, but both are not telling me to help through recovery and not helping with food or vitamins. I want to get a doctor by my side to help me. I can't find that here where I live in Louisiana. Can you please help me? And thank you for being here for me and my girl. So I'm going to throw a couple of things out at you that, first of all, when we're talking about, if we're going to use the R word, right? We have to talk a little bit about that for a second. But then I also want to say to you that there isn't, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, right? There's no, I have looked far and wide, and I have not yet met someone who meets the criteria of recovery as I understand it to be, which is that you don't need any supports for your life, that you're able, without supports, to maintain a B or C average in your schoolwork, and that you're able to do all the things that you want to do in your life with nothing holding you back. That's sort of the criteria that I hold for the R word. But I've yet to meet someone who has that. I met lots of people who had that used to have an autism diagnosis, but no one who didn't have ABA therapy. So we can talk about the autism doctor, we can talk about the diet, we can talk about things that help your child to clear the fog, all of that stuff. But all of that stuff clears the fog, and then you have to learn, and you're behind. So whatever you're doing, and whatever, and I applaud you wanting to keep your child's diet clean, whatever, but the ABA piece has to be there, yes?
ABA piece has to be there because for whatever reason, your child is not learning like everybody else. And so what we always tell people is we're not here to teach your child everything. That's impossible.
Right.
But we can figure out and help your child figure out how they learn. And if we can show them a better way to learn, or at least how to break down the information that they're receiving when they're out there, in life, then if they can figure out how to learn, then that's the piece they're missing.
Yeah.
It's the big piece. And it's not often simple, but it is with ABA right now. If you're sleeping better, eating better, feeling healthy, of course, for all of us, we all learn better. We're more aware, we're more awake, we're more attentive. If there is some kind of biomedical piece that prevents you, and for us, like neurotypically, if I have allergies on that day, I'm not as quick.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that keep us away biomedically. So that is a piece that here at CARD we do encourage a lot, is address both issues, but it is both.
Yeah, and so to answer your other part of your question, because I just didn't want to leave that out, there's a group of doctors that they're called MedMaps doctors, and it's maps with 2 Ps, and I don't know what that stands for anymore. I used to.
Too.
It was like medical, I don't know. I'm not even going to try. But you can Google it, MEDMAPPS.
And then if you put autism, it comes right up.
There you go. And there's probably one in your area, but some of them do telehealth. One of my favorite MedMaps doctors that does telehealth, if you have a naturopath in your area, then he's able to do telehealth in most states, is Dr. David Berger in Florida. And so you would go to your local naturopath, and then he would advise them on things to do for your child. But if you're talking about diet, Julie Matthews is the recognized far and wide expert, and she has books. There's and a website, Nourishing Hope, and you can go and find out so much information. I always think that I know a fair bit about the diet thing, and I'll go on to one of her webinars, and she'll say something. I'll never forget the time I was on a webinar, and she was talking about something, and she was like, well, and when you soak your grain, and everybody on the webinar was like, what did you just mutter about soaking grain? And she was like, well, when you soak your grains before you, do you know about this?
No, I don't. I've heard about it, but I don't know anything.
We were all like, say what again? And she was like, oh, you guys don't know about soaking your, okay, let's stop for a second and talk about soaking your grains because it makes them more digestible. And I was like, I've never heard that before in my life. And she's full of things like that. She really is the recognized expert far and away. So she's somebody, and she has a website, she has a book, and she has private coaching. So Julie Matthews, Nourishing Hope, and I'll reach out to her to see if we've had her on the show before. We'll see if we can have her be on the show again.
People love her.
She's brilliant and knows more about diet than any 8 million people I know. So there's that. And I do think, as you were saying, that a person has to be healthy and their digestive system has to work, right? And all the other systems have to work to be able to optimally learn. But once they're optimally able to learn, then you want to teach them in the quickest, most effective way that there is, and that's ABA. The science is in on that. That's the thing to do. And in Louisiana, you have a lot of ABA providers that are there. Obviously, I'm going to recommend that if you can be with a card office, do that. But those options are available to you. Everything that I just listed is available to you in Louisiana. Anything you want to add, madam?
I do know from having gone to Louisiana quite a bit, the medical part is a challenge.
Okay.
Finding providers is a challenge. Louisiana, when we arrived at CARD, there were no other ABA providers at the time,
Yeah.
and now there's a lot, which is great. But it does take some time for the local community to catch up.
Yeah.
And medically, definitely. I know a lot of our families have had trouble finding people who are local. But you do take those options like Dr. Berger in Florida, where you're not that far away, and if he's willing to do telehealth, doing the research, finding a provider who's willing to listen and to try something new. Because I think that many times in the medical community, they want to only do what's tried and true. But with autism, it's so new and it's so diverse and it's spectrum that the doctors who are willing to work, that's really, I think, a characteristic that you need to find in a medical professional. Someone that's willing to hear something else, hear another professional, and be able to question and look at your child and say, is this working, is this not working, what is best for them?
Okay, we have to take a short break, and then we're going to come back. We've got a bunch more questions coming in about diet. It's like Diet Day here at Autism Live. So stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself, why does my child stim? Well, first of all, let's talk about what stimming is. Stimming is a slang term for self-stimulatory behavior, which is kind of a misnomer anyway, because a lot of the times when our children engage in these kinds of behaviors, they're not to stimulate themselves. Sometimes they're to soothe themselves. So first of all, we want to get rid of the notion that it's to stimulate themselves. But they do these behaviors because there's something about it that feels good. And that's the main thing that we need to know as parents. It's not some random behavior. There's something about it that's giving the child a paycheck. And once we get an idea of what that might be, we need to find a behavior that can take that behavior's place and start to reinforce that. We want to pick something that's more socially acceptable. So if, for instance, the child is doing a lot of hand flapping because they like seeing their blurred fingers, then we can find something else for them to focus on, maybe a toy that does blurred colors. So for a period of time, they'll focus on that. The main thing to remember, though, is that there is a reason for these behaviors. There's something about it that feels good to the child. And once we know that, we can begin to change it. There's a phrase that's being used in the autism community called stimming. Welcome back. I want to say hi to Ellen, who wrote in and said, hi, Shannon and Evelyn. And she said that's exactly what we go through with my parents and my ASD twins. But you were saying how much you love to do grandparent training. And I used to love the show Parenthood. And you know, the guy who did Parenthood, he has a new show that's coming out in the fall that has to do with autism. But I loved how they would depict autism within a huge family on Parenthood. And there's one scene where the granddad is like, I'm taking him fishing. I've taken every one of my grandkids fishing. I'm taking him fishing. And then, of course, he gets him fishing and it all falls apart. And he calls the dad and he's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And he said, I did this and I did that. And the dad says, well, you gave him all of his reward before you had him do what you wanted him to do. So now you got to come up with something else to reward him and ask him to do that. And then they have this great fishing trip, right?
That's great.
There was a certain point, my poor son, the only grandparent that he had when he was little was my mom, and then my mom passed away. So he's got no grandparents. I feel so bad for him. But there was a period of time when I sat down with my mother and I said, look, you're the only grandparent we have and I need you.
Yeah.
And I had watched Suzanne Wright on the Larry King Show. And Suzanne Wright, for those of you who don't know, she's She was Bob Wright's wife, and they have a daughter who had a child on the spectrum, and they're the ones who started Autism Speaks because their grandchild was on the spectrum. And Suzanne Wright, very controversial character in the autism community, but please, God rest her soul, because she passed away about 2 years ago. She was on Larry King, and he was talking to her about the autism thing, and she said, you know, grandparents need to get involved.
Yes.
Like, we need to not be sitting on the sidelines. And she said, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to step in it 32 times. Yeah. And she's like, but you keep coming and you do everything that you need to do. And she said, even if the parents don't have any time to go seek funding and grants and stuff, she said, even as a grandparent, if you just fill out grants. And I went to my mom and I said, look, I need some help and support. And so I would shuttle things to her and say, find out about this and give her a job to do. And she was better then, because then she felt like she had something involved. But ultimately what we did was we invited her to come and watch. I had a baby monitor, and she was watching ABA in the other room, and the first day she was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe, they saw you coming, Shannon. And then by the end of the week, I remember her standing up in the room that we were in and going, this is the most incredible thing. Why isn't this on the nightly news? I just watched them teach him how to learn this, and she was like, this is amazing. So do what you have to do. Keep your parents involved if you can.
And when they can see that transformation, it's amazing. Because I've done a lot of grandparent training or just training at the beginning, and I've had parents after the first day look at me like, you're the craziest person. You've duped our kids into coming here. And then by the third day, they're like hugging and kissing me and we just love this. This is amazing. How can, give us a task.
Yeah.
And I just love it. It's just being like, okay, you want to be involved? Let's get involved.
It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Now, we did have a bunch of people, because we brought up diet, a bunch of people wrote in about diet, and somebody asked, does a GFCF diet work for autistic adults? So GFCF, for those of you who don't know, is gluten-free, casein-free. Gluten is a protein that's in wheat and other grains, some grains, and casein is the protein in milk. And I certainly want your opinion on this, Ev, but I just want to say that it has been shown conclusively that the GFCF diet does not work for everyone.
Yes.
So for some kids, my son made tremendous progress on the GFCF diet, but that is not every single kid. And so obviously it would follow that it would not be every single adult. But here's the really interesting thing, is that in my experience, I've seen adults on the spectrum and not on the spectrum go on the GFCF diet. And even we had, at one point, our ABA team all together decided that they were going to go GFCF for the month of April to see what it was like for Jem and her other clients. And they were like, we're just going to see what it is. By the end of April, 2 of the 5 therapists that were on our team at that point said, this has been life-changing for me. And one of them discovered that she was celiac.
Wow.
And it changed her life. But another one who did not discover that he was celiac said, I have never felt clearer in my life. I have never had a better experience of my intestine, to get TMI, but he was like, it's like an amazing difference. So 2 of the 5 were like, what? Life change. One of them was like, I feel a little bit better, but not well enough that I'm not going to eat the things that I don't want. And the other 2 were like, no, like TikTok, is it done? I'm going to In-N-Out and getting a burger with cheese on it, right? So, but for the 2 that it was life-changing for, it was life-changing. So I always say, try it.
That's an interesting percentage, because that's usually the percentage that I tell people it's not for all people with autism, but it probably is that large percentage. 2 of 5 sounds just about right.
Yeah.
And this is just from having many people come through.
Yeah.
And some families try it and there's no difference, and some say like they try it and on day 2 or day 20 they're just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
The changes that they see.
And worthwhile. So, my thing is I would say try it for at least 30 days. I think for some people it takes longer than that. But you really have to do it. You can't be like, on Tuesday I'm going to eat a little bit of wheat and a little bit of cheese, and then you're not going to see whether it really works.
Yeah, and it's good if you try them separately. So gluten is in the wheat, and the celiac is in the casein is the milk products. So the milk products, I find that usually within 3 weeks you can see a difference, and people see it pretty quickly. And then with the wheat, it does take usually about 6 weeks, I think.
Okay.
Some are right away, but we've had people go about 6 weeks and really go clean and see the biggest difference.
Wow.
But if you do it separately, because they don't always come together. Some people it's only the casein, and some people it's only the gluten.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so Missy says, is it the autism and rigid thinking or sensory issues that cause kids with autism to not want to eat various foods? It seems that my child decides that he doesn't like foods that he previously liked. What do you want to say about that?
I think the whole eating factor is just like other kids. They all have various reasons for why they're not eating.
Yeah.
I always say I had a 1-year-old who was eating salsa and green. Her favorite thing was tomatoes, at 18 months. And my other one at 2 basically told me, "You're not supposed to eat green things.
Right.
You walk on grass that's green, but you don't eat them."
So they kind of create these rules for themselves.
And I always talk to families. I said, you kind of have to test it out and, watch your child and see what their response is. And there are some kids that will not eat certain shapes of food, some that won't eat certain colors, some that do have the sensory where it's just tactilely. It's just very defensive and they can't stand the feel of it. Some crave certain tastes and some find certain tastes just awful, like they can't stand it at all. But I'll go through and try, we'll try different times. And you're saying that this child actually will start to eat something and then stops eating it. Sometimes it's an obsession. And when the obsessions change, it's a perseveration that is changing just like all their other wants and needs. Sometimes we think it's the same food and you changed one ingredient and they figured out that ingredient change and they don't want it anymore just because it's not the same.
Yeah.
It's the routine that they want. Some people, I had a family who the child would only drink things if it came out of a Jack-in-a-Box cup, coffee cup.
Yeah.
And that's the only cup she would drink it out of. And they were like, for whatever. So parents would just pour anything into this cup and say, have your coffee. And she had coffee because grandma had coffee from Jack in the Box.
So it felt like big girl thing.
It was big girl, but also it was the routine. Grandma does this every day, so I'm going to do it with her. And as long as it was in that cup, she would drink anything that was in it. Like there's so many different reasons why the kids have their preferences. And it really is slowly going through each one and trying to figure out what is it that is the routine.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is routine based. The sensory it's a sensory tactile, and that's where you work with your occupational therapist or your speech therapist or your ABA person to systematically desensitize the child to that feeling or that texture.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you from here what exactly it is that your child is changing their preference for their food.
But I think the empowering thing that we all need to recognize is that your child can be very rigid with food and that can be changed. And that your child can get to the point where they eat other things. I see people all the time. It's very interesting to me that people with neurotypical children, neurotypical children are like, he will only eat French fries from Burger King and the nuggets from McDonald's. And so they will go through those 2 drive-thrus for their neurotypical child. And I'm like, well, when did he become the boss of how this goes?
Completely.
Like what? And you're just okay with that? And you're going to you've seen the movie Super Size Me, and that's what you're going to feed your child for the next however long until he stops it? There's a little part of me that goes, why are you just accepting this? And I think that's probably the ABA mom in me, because I've seen that, sometimes it's really slow, but that you can totally change. Here's a great example. If we had the A word to show you, there was a period of time in which when they started working with Jack Riley that he had big food issues.
Oh yeah, he did.
And if you showed him a banana, a real 3-dimensional banana, he would cry. It was just that aversive for him. And Dad was really concerned about it. He was like, my child needs to be able to eat healthy food and he can't go through life crying when he sees a banana. And so they showed all the different ways that they desensitized him until the day, and it was probably 8 months later that he sat there and ate a banana all on his own. And you know, in the scheme of things, you know, we go, oh, well, they got it done. But for that family, that 8 months, they were like, are we ever going to get there? Is that ever going to happen? But later, it's so funny how time plays tricks on you. Later, everybody was like, oh, it only took eight months. But it was a long 8 months.
But I have to tell you, a lot of our kids come in who have reflux when they're babies.
Yeah.
And we had a child come in who, he was 4, and if you showed him a plate, he would throw up. That's how aversive food was.
Wow.
Is you showed him a plate and he would immediately vomit because his association with it, and he had a terrible history. And Mom actually ended up removing him from all the medications because there's too many side effects. And she went the naturopath way. And this kid, I think when he was 9, and we worked with him. We did food for the first 2 years where we were just getting the healthiest foods into him and got him eating, but he didn't enjoy eating. And it wasn't until he was 9, his dad called me one day and said, oh my goodness, I can't believe it. He woke up and said he was hungry, and he actually asked for food, and it was the food that they've been trying to get him to eat forever. Right. And they thought the day would never come that he would like food.
Right.
And, you know, and it's cool now because he actually does a cooking show.
Oh, look at how that all
Because he loves
works
food now, because
out.
he has full control, and he loves the whole process, the variety. But I always say, like, when he came in at 4, if you showed him a plate, he would just vomit immediately, no matter where he was, because food was just so aversive to him.
So the lesson is, you know, you got to work on these things and not be afraid to work on them, because strength over time equals power, and it happens. Okay, I want to hit a couple more of these questions. We had last week, earlier this week, we had a life coach on, and somebody wrote in and said, would it be a good idea to hire a life coach? And I know you had something you wanted to say about that.
So since ABA treatment now has been opened up to all ages, and so the variety of people everywhere, we actually have college students who come in, and sometimes they're with the parents, sometimes they're on their own, and somebody has helped them realize they need some help.
Yeah.
And the idea of therapy just doesn't sit right with them. Yeah. And so we have actually had a lot of our college kids say, hey, you know what? We'll give you a life coach. And it's one of our therapists. Yeah. And they'll use an ABA approach with you. But, you know, they're really these kids have all gotten into college on their own. And maybe there was one parent who she actually went to visit her child this first year. And she was like, she called and she was like, I'm horrified. I was like, why are you horrified? He's walking through campus and all these people are greeting him, and he's just going to his class. Oh. He's just, he knows how to greet people, he knows how to do things, but what's going on? And we were laughing because when we talked to him, he was just like, he had one purpose: I have to get to class. Right. And it was just somebody going through with him and saying, hey, you know what, when you're walking through, this is how you meet people. People see you. Right. You know, and just kind of giving the social aspects of what's appropriate. And he was just like, oh, I never even thought about it. Right. And even though he's a great kid, and actually, spectrum-wise, he doesn't fit a diagnosis, but he was a child here for a long, long time. Right. And his parents came back and said they're just adjusting to college life. Right. And so we provided a life coach for him. Which is a wonderful thing. It was just another guy, similar age, because another college student that was one of our therapists, and would just go to campus with him, doing different things one time a week. Yeah. And just talk about, hey, this is a way to get into a certain community. Yeah. If you're really interested, when you walk through campus. And be aware. Yeah. And those things make all the difference. Mm-hmm. Because it just opened him up to a lot of more relationships with people. Yeah. And you could be doing, 108 things right, but it's the 111th thing that you don't know that sometimes can be sinking the whole battleship. So, life coach, if you can do it, it's a great thing for all of us. Right? I totally agree, and it just helps you get through life and more successfully, more quickly. Get the things you want. Yep. And for this kid, he was in and out. He was here, I think, 6 months. There you go. It was just like an adjustment to college. And how many other typical college students probably could have used it? Oh, please. Please. Okay, somebody else wants to know, can you please tell me the difference between echolalia and verbal stimming? I love this question. Yes. I would say the function of it. Like, this is from a very ABA perspective. You know, when we see a behavior, and it can, you know, if it's a challenging behavior in any way, we'll look and try to figure out what is the function of the behavior. There are some kids who come through and, you know, they have verbal self-stimulatory behavior, and I'll realize, oh, wow, they're using it to communicate.
Yeah.
And there's a purpose for it. And then that's when I would say, like, the kids that do this, it always amazes me, because my rote memory is nowhere near so many of the kids we work with.
Oh, yeah.
But where they don't know how to formulate their own language, but they can take a line from Pocahontas or some Disney movie and use it to get their needs met
Yeah.
with their parent.
Yes.
You know, and
Absolutely.
I can't even think of one right now, but we've had so many kids come through and be able to grab a script from
Yes.
some favorite show
Yes.
and use it to get manned to ask for things that they want, things they're
Yes.
interested in, things they need, you know, just wanting to talk about some subject that they
Yeah.
really love, and they don't know how to formulate the language, put the word together, so they go and they grab the script and put it into this functional. And when I say it's functional, that they're getting some need met and there's a response from
Yeah.
another person. Verbal stimming is, a lot of times, it's perseverative.
Yeah.
There's no function to it except that it somehow, in that automatic behavior, really pleases that person internally.
So it's not an attempt to communicate, it's something internal.
Yeah, it's something that they really love. And even then, I always go one step beyond in terms of automatic. If people tell me about automatic behaviors like verbal stimming, I say, well, but what do they like about it? Try to figure it out. Because I've had kids who just love to hear things. They don't like it when it's quiet.
Yeah.
And so an easy replacement was to teach them how to listen to music.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then suddenly all the verbal stim goes down. But sometimes they just like the sequence of the script.
Yeah.
You know, or sometimes they like the feeling of it. There's all these ways that it can internally please them. And if you
Yeah.
can figure out what it is and then find an appropriate replacement, that behavior will go down.
Yeah. I would say that one of the hardest things that took the longest with my son was that there was a verbal stim that they called it vocal stereotypy, that he would do basically I always forget which robot is which in Star Wars, excuse me. That's the ultimate mistake, right? So it's R2D2, right? Or no?
The little white one
C-3PO.
is R2D2, and the big gold one is C-3PO.
Okay, so the little one makes all those. I can't even do the high noise, but that's what my son would do. So if he was excited about something, he would go, you know, and make this noise, and that very high up in his head that would sort of make his sinuses vibrate. And I think that was part of why he liked it. And we worked on it forever, and we would say, use your words, and all these different things. And it finally was, one of the therapists said, because I was like, in school, the kids around him didn't want to sit next to him because he would make these noises. And so the therapist said to him, do you know how to make that noise in your head without me hearing it? And Jem was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, you know, do it softer and softer and softer, and now keep making the noise until he got to the point where he couldn't hear it. And he said to him, does it do the same thing for you as if you do it loud? And Jem said, yeah. And he goes, well, then just do it in your head from now on. And you know what? Like, and that sounds ridiculous. Like, it's so simple that it's stupid, but that worked. That totally worked.
And I have to say this because that worked for Jem.
Yeah, but it wouldn't necessarily work for everybody.
It doesn't work for everyone. And there are a lot of things we want to be out and hearing so that we can replace them.
Yes.
Because there are a group of behavior analysts out there who teach think it in your head, and then it's too much in their head, and then the kids are in their head.
Oh, interesting.
And then you can't get them out of their head, and you have no control because you don't know what's going on in their head.
Okay,
And it
so be
becomes a
careful
whole
with that.
different issue.
All right, so we don't want to do that. Okay, let's keep that in mind. Okay, I think I've got time for one more question, and I'm trying to pick a goodie. A goodie. Oh, I know which one I want. I want the one over here. I have a 16-year-old daughter with autism. What can I do to help her with social skills?
Oh, this is a big question.
Yeah, it is.
Because we don't know where she is at.
And you've got
socially.
about a minute and a half. So there you go. No pressure. No pressure at all.
There's so many levels of interaction. A 16-year-old, let's say high functioning,
Okay, let's
where
see.
they're in typical school environment, but they have odd behaviors or just very ASD. I think a lot of that is going to look and seeing, like, what is she good at? You know, what is she like? What is there any part of her behavior that the outside world really loves, could really love?
Yeah.
I always say the kids who have great drawing ability or singing or whatever, music, whatever it is, that you want to shine a light on that because it becomes something that she'll get a lot of reinforcement for.
Well, you find the group of people too that's reinforcing to them.
Exactly.
You find your tribe.
You find your tribe. You definitely do. And if, so if there is that thing that other people are interested in, and then she can find her group and she'll fit right in, and she'll probably be really good at that thing.
Yeah.
And people will give her a lot of respect, and that immediately will create the group, the social situation. Because you don't need to be popular.
Yeah.
Although I had one of our kids come in and was not happy that he had a friend. He wanted to be popular. So, but for her, it's just finding that one thing that she likes, that she enjoys, that there's other people who have this interest too. And it doesn't have to be a group of people. It can be the one other person. Yeah. It can be that one other person who loves math.
Right.
And is so interested in that, whether it's math or music or some movie script or whatever it may be, and really taking advantage of that and using that love or that that talent to increase your interactions with people, not just in school, but if there's people outside. I always think long term. Like there's a lot of things in high school that maybe aren't so interesting to high school kids, but that in college she'll find those people.
Yeah.
And just trying to think a little bit more long term about where it could go, and being able to channel her towards that that group of people or that person. There's talents. We have kids who persevere in weather, and we have one I think he's getting a PhD in meteorology now or something. But I mean, just really, he never had a lot of friends, but he had that one friend that was interested in what he was, and when he got to college, he had a whole department.
But I'm going to say, too, that I think this goes even if it's not a high-functioning kid. I think this is great advice no matter what. That we've had on the show here a group of people, Spectrum Laboratories, that it's here in Los Angeles, and they have a wide variety of people that take their classes together. There are people who are neurotypical, there are people who are very high-functioning, there are people who have some pretty significant issues, and I have watched over a 3-year period these people make videos together. Then they go and work separately on things. They come back to class together, and I have seen them create this bubble of artists, and they are all welcome and invited. And for especially for the kids who have more significant challenges, I've heard their parents and grandparents say, this has been the most amazing thing.
And additionally, I have kids who are very challenged adults now. Yeah. And what we've really tried to work with the families is finding leisure activities that they can do. And it can be anything from creating a routine to work out.
Yes.
It can be Frisbee so they can get the visual stereotypy.
Right.
Whatever it may be, but teaching them something that there are other people who are interested in that activity.
There you go.
And you can put it right in to their system where there's going to be a group of people that they can find to interact with, to have. It might not be the social skills you're thinking about, but they'll have a group of people that they can interact with and be amazing at, usually.
And that's the thing. We all want to have a sense of belonging and,
And it creates some positive interaction. Just, life gets boring if you don't have enough things to do. And I think a lot of people forget that for our challenged kids.
Yes.
I'm a big proponent of, you can be challenged, but hey, let's teach you a lot of these leisure activities so that your life can be fulfilling.
There you go. We're officially out of time. We've gone over. I apologize, Traven. I have a new clock that tells me, and I still couldn't do it. But it was too fascinating. So thank you so much. We so appreciate your time.
You're very
We're
welcome.
told that we have Dr. Grampy Shea back next week, but we'll look forward to having you again soon.
Okay.
And thank you so much. You guys, it's been great. I want to tell you just a little bit about the rest of this week. Tomorrow we have autism expert Laura Smith, and we have Bonnie Yates joining us tomorrow for the first time since she became a grandmother. So that you're not going to want to miss that. And then on Friday we have Kristen Roth from the Autism Society of America. We're talking about their new AutFest that's happening in September, the film festival. So you tune in for that, and then on Friday we're going to unveil who our big guest is next week, and it's going to blow all your socks off. Make time, save the date on Monday. We have a big show on Monday with a big guest.
Wow.
It's a big deal. So until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye bye for now.